Welcome to Heavy Gear Blitz, a 12mm tabletop game that takes place 5,000 years in the future on a planet called Terra Nova. You will command forces combining tanks, infantry, aircraft, and most importantly, gears, single pilot controlled walkers. My name is D-Ron and I'm going to be walking you through the basics of how to play Heavy Gear Blitz. The dice mechanics in Heavy Gear Blitz are pretty easy. You start out with 2 dice, and modifiers will either add a die or subtract a dice to a minimum of 1 dice. Most of the time you're just rolling the dice, taking the highest, and then all the other dice will either add on to the dice or add nothing. First things first is Gear Grinder. This is a website used to build your armies for Heavy Gear Blitz. We're going to be looking at the Peace River Warrior today. It's super easy. There's a lot of profiles you can look through. Most of them are just different loadouts for the same model, so don't worry about the large amount of profiles you see. It's pretty simple. You just press the plus icon on the left, and then you go ahead and press the list option. This is your more traditional list option that you see. Has all of your stats, has all of your weapons, all the rules you kind of need for your model. And then here's the data card. So we're going to be going ahead and looking at the basic stats. So we have the unit name, the unit availability, TV or also points, the type of gear size it is, its movement value, how far it can move, its gunnery skill, so how good it is at shooting, how many actions it can take a turn, which is usually 1, the piloting skill, which is used for defense, armor, which is used for calculating damage, hull/structure is the total health of the gear. Electronic warfare is used for ECM attacks and comms. And traits, which you also get the weapons and anything else it has. Heavy Gear Blitz is pretty simple. Most models you're basically just doing a move action, and then you're using that 1 action point to do an attack, and then you can continue on moving and so forth. Movement is pretty simple. There's 3 types of movements. The basic one is your combat move you can do, which is just moving up to your base value. So for example, this Crusader can go up to 5 inches, or it can split its movement by doing 2 inches in action and then 3 inches. There's top speed, which basically can move double your movement. You sacrifice a gunnery skill, but you also get a benefit to your piloting dice. There's also brace, which you basically stay in the same position, but you can move around, and you get +1 to your gunnery skill. Some gears, like the Chasseur from the New Cole, has the hover technique that can fly over different terrain features. Shooting is pretty simple in Heavy Gear Blitz. In this case, we're having 2 models that are shooting at each other. First, you check the range of the model, which in this case is 12 inches between the Chasseur and the Warrior. You pick 1 gun, which the Chasseur is picking its light autocannon. Different modifiers will affect how many dice you roll because you start out with 2 base dice. The light autocannon gives you +1 burst, which means that you get 3 dice to roll. So as you can see in this image below, the roll is a 5, a 2, and a 3. So this is for the Chasseur light autocannon attack on the warrior. The 5 is the highest number, so you take that value. And then you look at the 2 and 3, and you compare it to the gunnery skill. If it is a 4 plus, like the gunnery skill says, then you add 1 to the 5. So that 5 would be a 6 if it was a 4 plus. But in this case, the total value is a 5. Now we're going to go ahead and roll for the piloting skill of the warrior. It's 2 dice, but because of cover, you get 1 extra die. As you can see here, it's a 7 because the 6 is the highest number, and the 4 plus beats the piloting skill of a 4 up for the warrior. So you just add 1 to that 6, and it's 7. In this case, the 7 is the winner, so the Peace River warrior survives the attack. We're going to look at an example of the warrior attacks a Shazur in the open. So you see here that the warrior moves out, does an action to shoot at the Shazur, gets a 6, and let's just assume that the Shazur only gets a 4 for its total roll. Now it's pretty easy how you calculate damage. You just take the 6 and the 4 and you do just basic subtraction. The subtraction total is called your margin of success, which is a 2. Your MOS is just used to calculate damage, which is pretty simple. All you do is you add the MOS plus the damage of the light autocannon, which is 6, which is 8 total damage. And in this case, the Shazur takes 2 points of damage. Indirect attacks. First things first is that all models have an 18-inch scan range. This you can measure at any point in the game. Normally you can't pre-measure, but this is the only time you can pre-measure. For an indirect attack, it's pretty simple. You basically have to have your model within scan range of the other model. In order to shoot an indirect attack, you get -1 die for indirect weapons. So in this case, the light rocket pack is shooting at the Shazur, gets a solid 5, while the Shazur gets 2 dice for its defense, which also gets a 5. In this situation, if the MOS is 0, you roll die, and on a 4 plus, the opponent takes 1 damage. This is when you have a margin of success of 0. ECM attacks are pretty easy. We kind of went through them with the electronic warfare. We're going to have the warrior do it. You can do 2 things with ECM. You can try to cripple something, or you can try to do ECM bubble. In this scenario, see here, the warrior rolled a 5 and a 4 for its electronic warfare skill. Shazur rolls for its EW skill and only gets a 3. The Shazur sucks, so because of this, the Shazur takes 1 point of damage for the haywire effect and is also crippled, which is -1 die for the whole turn for all of its actions. ECM bubble is pretty easy and is a really powerful tool to buff up your other models. Make sure that you're within 6 inches, also called formation. You make a EW roll, and as long as you pass, which in this case it did, it gives you +1 to your piloting skill for all of your models. Activating combat groups is pretty easy. All you do is that you pick a combat group that is usually 4 actions total. So as you see on the right, there's only 3 models because the Chevalier is 2 actions. All you do is basically you activate 1 model at a time, doing its actions, and then moving on to the next model. Once the action is completed for all the units in the combat group, you move on to your opponent, who also picks a combat group to move. So now that my opponent is going to be moving his Peace River squad, so obviously I'm going to be moving the warrior first. Now when I say like anything that's like +1, -1, it's always relating to dice. There's very few rules in the game that actually give you a -1 to the total value or a +1 to the total value. So there's only a few occasions like that, but most of the time it's just +1 or -1 dice. And now you're ready to fight. It's a pretty simple game, pretty easy. You can teach your friends how to play in a very short period of time. As far as tables go, just remember that you don't have to have a fancy table with all this nice terrain and stuff like that. It definitely makes the feeling of the Badlands way better as far as like narrative games go, but you can easily just play with like appliances and plates and stuff like that just around your house. And you're ready to fight on the battlefields of Terra Nova. This is a very competitive game and a very balanced game at that. You can go ahead and pick your stuff up at DreamPod 9 online. It's a very easy tool to use, and you can get all of the factions from South, North, Peace River, Nicole, and etc. Remember to like and subscribe, and remember to get your games in.